So when we did this report, we gave the same survey in all 7 countries. And one of the questions on the survey was, do you think there will be kinetic? Kinetic means action, like a military action usually. Do you think there will be a kinetic event in the Indo-Pacific before 2024? Every single Chinese respondent said yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So they differed on how serious it would be, whether it would be small events or big events, but they are psychologically prepared for a kinetic event in the Indo-Pacific. Now, the other thing that came out, where the China survey was an outlier from everybody else, the other thing that we asked was, do you think the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea will have legitimacy in 2024? None of the Chinese respondents said yes.
Did the other respondents mostly say yes?
The other respondents mostly said, of course, why are you asking this stupid question?
Okay.
And that's why we're in this situation.
Well, okay, so then what did the other respondents say about the kinetic event by 2024?
They were possible to probable.
Well, I'm curious. You've said that the Chinese Communist Party is masterful at controlling the narrative. Is it possible the China survey was also part of their plan?
It's possible, and I had a lot. There was a lot of internal discussion about how to do the China survey. I wasn't going to go to China to do it. I also didn't have the contact. And the other thing that we wanted to do was, as much as possible, do the discussions in the language of the country and with people from the country only. So in Tonga, for example, the Tongan Roundtable was held in Tongan language. And apart from kind of my little team, the only people in the room were Tongans. And so it's very much a conversation among themselves. And my impression from the Chinese survey results is that you always have to, distrust and verify. But my feeling is it's pretty reflective of the perception, because they have nothing to gain from flagging up that they're willing to challenge the unconventional law of the sea and they're expecting a fight.
Well, you mentioned in the report that this is one of the issues that has been sort of uniting the world, that the Chinese Communist Party has become more and more aggressive, particularly on the Indian border.
Yeah. And that's another good point, because there was sometimes people think of propaganda as being about a positive reflection of the country. You want people to like you. I'm not so sure that's actually what China wants. I think that, there also used to be discussion within China about saying that their justification for the Chinese Communist Party's policies was aspiration among the population. So, your life is going to suck, but your kid's life, your child's life is going to be better. So you have this sort of aspirational justification for your authoritarianism. But as the economy within China has had increasing problems, and there are all sorts of other increasing problems, I think the main internal motivator has shifted from aspiration to fear. So that's where you get social credit system, and you get all of these other kind of fear-based controls domestically of Chinese society. And I think that in terms of international cooperation, there's also been a bit of a shift where the Chinese Communist Party doesn't need to be loved. They just want to be feared, right? So, they're perfectly happy to, kill the chicken to scare the monkeys, or whatever that expression is, which is what you saw in Anchorage. When you saw during the Alaska discussion,
the U.S.-China meeting.
Yeah, I mean the discussion there was: are the Chinese side talking to a Chinese domestic audience, or I think they're talking to ASEAN. They're talking to all of those other littler countries, and saying, if we can do this to the U.S. publicly, imagine what we can do to you.
So, how do you think that meeting is being perceived in the Indo-Pacific?
I think that there's a pretty sophisticated analysis of China. The closer you live to China, the more sophisticated your analysis is of China. It wasn't a great first impression, but I think countries are largely waiting for action, waiting to see what's going to happen. And it's not just military; it's also economic, and in terms of the vaccines, and in terms of tech cooperation. So my assessment currently is people are waiting. They're waiting to see what's going to happen. If the U.S. shows strength, the momentum that we saw developing during the report from kind of March 2020 to February 2021 is countries being willing to come together and create alternative supply chains and critical infrastructure cleaning up, and But currently, India is the only country that blocked those Chinese apps, which is a good bellwether for how well you understand the Chinese security risk, especially online. So, we'll see. I think we're definitely in things are not great, and we'll see what happens situation.
So are they waiting to see what China does, or are they waiting to see what the US does?
I think they're waiting to see what the US does. And I think it's not restricted to the region. So in 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, China attacked India. And we'll see whether, as that alternate grouping comes together, the China, Russia, Turkey, potentially Iran, North Korea groupings, Pakistan coordinates. If I was a Chinese Communist Party strategist, I would want all of those partners to be starting as many fires as they could before I went in to Taiwan, for example. And it could be. I mean, one of the discussions that we had recently was if China's heavily invested in Argentina, very heavily invested in Argentina. And what happens if it gives logistical support to the Argentinians to do an attack on the Falklands? That takes, from a strategic perspective, that takes the UK off the board for a while because they're going to have to deal with that crisis. So if you start enough of those things via proxies, like Burma, like Myanmar, what's happening in Myanmar, then that leaves you a lot more maneuvering room. And if you combine it with cyber attacks or electronic warfare, things that are a lot harder to attribute at the same time, the West, so to speak, has a really serious challenge of how to counter it.
So even if the Biden-Harris administration fully intended to support Taiwan in the event of any kind of Chinese aggression, it might just become difficult because of all of these proxy wars or various attacks that come up that just...
We get sucked into the Middle East again because of Iran.
As we're pulling out troops from Afghanistan, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, and not just Iran, because, Pakistan is a very strong iron brother, they call it, of China. So you start to see increasing terrorist attacks, Wahhabi terrorist attacks, all at the same time, and there is emplacement. What happens if the Maldives starts to experience much more Wahhabi-based terror? I mean, I'm just giving sort of an example, but those smaller places they're more difficult to handle because they haven't been gamed. You don't have as many pieces in place. The allies that would be necessary to counter it might not be in play. It can get very bad very quickly with not a lot of cost to Beijing. So so it's not great, and the cyber component of it is kind of a wild card.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how much do you think China can do cyber-wise that most people aren't aware of?
Anything that you're worried about, it can probably do. I mean, do you want to, water filtration, electrical grid, shutting off of I mean, I don't know what apps you guys have on your phone.
WeChat.
Yeah. Yeah, and this and in fact, this is something that you guys talked on another episode, which was very interesting, about China's digital currency, right? If they manage to launch their digital currency, they can wipe out your bank account kind of immediately if that's what you're relying on, and they're going to try to bring that in. I would expect along the Belt and Road in the same way that they've have countries signing up to Baidu navigation system along the Belt and Road. So any place it touches or one of its allies touch is vulnerable, and anything electronic is vulnerable. I mean, we have a problem. We really have a problem.